to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it, and I know that politics is particularly confusing these days with all of the misinformation and propaganda that is running rampant out there. So, this is the place where you can ask all of your questions about politics, and there's no judgments, there's no roasting, there's no debating. It's just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. So go ahead and throw your questions in the chat and we will get to answering them. What's up, JP? Good to see you again. Any questions about politics, just put them in the chat. What's up, D. Scott? Good to see you. Yeah, we are ready to get started today, guys. What's up, Sauce Boss? Mon says tap con parton tiki tiki. That does not seem to be a question about politics, Mon. Thank you, Dan, for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. That was very sweet. We haven't even gotten a question out yet today. So yeah, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and I'll go ahead and answer them. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something on the outskirts, something in between. This is not a debate show. There is no, what do you call it? There's going to be no owning of anybody here. It is just good faith answers to all good faith questions. So if there is a question that you've always wanted to answer, but you asked, but you were worried about, this question makes me seem like some sort of a MAGA person, you don't got to worry about that. I am not going to judge you based on your question. And similarly, if you have a question that you've always wanted to ask, but you're worried it would make you sound like some sort of a libtard, cuck person, you don't have to worry about that either. I'm not going to judge you no matter what your question is. Dan Blackburn says, I got a peace prize from the Women's Wrestling Association of Fiji over the weekend. Oh, I heard that's very prestigious, damn. Sauceboss says, do you see the former Fox News host calling out Pete for his war crimes? I did not. You know, it's so strange how many former things are fine with calling out Trump and his acolytes for all the illegal things that they're doing. What's up, Willie? Good to see you again. Middle class, my ass says, politics? Now, what do you think about the fact millions of Americans are struggling? I think it's a fucking travesty, and it is the fault of the billionaire class and the Republican Party. You know, you say politics now, but politics is directly related to the reason why Americans are struggling right now. William Sell says, how deep do you believe Russia is in conservative politics? Oh, they're, yeah, at least elbow deep, I would say. Antonio says, I have a question. Please don't judge, but are you Democrat or Republican? I'm a Democrat. And Antonio, one of the things we do here is we don't judge people based on their questions. Okay, Kingston says, MAGA gonna get cooked by Jared harder than Anakin on Mustafar. That's very funny, but we don't cook anybody here. We are engaging in good faith. Let's see here. PG&E 7 rate hikes in 16 months. Ooh, that's interesting. Sauceboss says, why did Trump just randomly decide to change the JFK award from a rainbow for no reason? Well, I think that he probably thinks that the rainbow belongs to the LGBTQ community, and he does not want to be a part of advocating for that at all. Middle class mass says, Democrats are the problem too, my guy. Sorry, I want to finish reading that question. We need an American, a working class citizen to be in office. So I don't disagree with what you're saying there, middle class, but there's issues. You know, like there are differences between Republicans and Democrats. Like part of the reason why we have a cost of living crisis is because we have not built enough houses. And a lot of that is because the Trump administration defunded subsidized housing during his first administration. Some of it is because private equity has been buying up all the single family homes, which is a free market policy that the Republican Party is totally fine with. A lot of the problem with the cost of living is no real competition in the marketplace because of hyper monopolization and all these conglomerates, which is a Reagan doctrine that we should let corporations form these giant conglomerates, even though it spits in the face of antitrust policy. And we had the Democrats trying to break up those monopolies during the Biden administration with Lena Khan. So I'm happy to go into more details about the differences between the parties and how cost of living is more directly related to the Republican Party, if you would like. A says, I heard ICE forced a person to sign deportation papers before getting medical treatment. unfortunately, that tracks with everything that I've heard about what ICE is doing, and yeah, it's fucking monstrous. Middle class says, bro, there are plenty of homes sitting empty, not to mention corporations buying them. Yeah, you beat me to it. So about the homes sitting empty, people that work in housing policies, middle class, will tell you that a lot of those houses are in need of repairs before anybody can live in them, and a lot of them are in places where there is no grocery store or public transportation, and so a lot of them are not feasible for people to move into if they can't afford a car and things like that. So yeah, I would love to believe that the issue is landlords holding open vacancies for their own greedy purposes, but anybody that works in housing policy will tell you that that is a liberal misinformation. Rena says Alina Hava just resigned. I have heard that, Rena, and I certainly hope the door does not hit her on the way out. William Tell says, let me give you an example. When at the Department of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld's press secretary was a Russian spy. I haven't heard that story, William Tell. I don't. I'm not all that skeptical considering the work that Russia has been doing, but yeah, I would need to give that a Google to double check. Willie says BlackRock and Vanguard subsidiaries are buying private real estate to inflate prices and charge rent. That tracks with everything that I know as well, Willie. Dan Blackford says QVC will love Alina Hava. Yeah, that's the job she was born for. William Tell says he was my next door neighbor. All right, well, I'm starting to doubt the validity of that story then. All right, back over to Twitch. Kingston says, I had to make you laugh just a little, so question when Trump's time is up. If he refuses to a peaceful transfer of power, let's say he tries to come up with some excuses, what happens? So there are mechanisms that, people that are smarter than me and more, knowledgeable about the mechanisms of government are sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? They are troubleshooting. They are looking forward. There is no set mechanism by which Trump can 100% stay in office. There are things that he can try to do, and depending on who is going along with it, he will get a certain amount of progress done on those fronts. Where his main failure was Mike Pence not you know agreeing that he could reject the outcome of the election. That was one of the points in which his sort of like mechanism fell apart. But if Mike Pence had gone along with that, then there would be other places where it could have fallen apart as well. Now, because MAGA has so thoroughly taken over the Republican Party, and because the judiciary now has a lot more Trump judges in it, there are going to be fewer of those points. But the one point that is not going away is we the people. And so we have the power to make it so that he does not succeed in that goal. And so long as people are informed and activated, then I am not confident that he will get away with it. Okay, Real Bendis says, why is there a rift between Kamala and Gavin Newsom? I think probably they are jockeying for either president. I think, yeah, they're probably jockeying for the nomination for president. Yeah, there's a certain, class of Democratic politician that gets a little bit too into the weeds of, taking shots at their own party, which I don't really care for, no matter who's doing it, if it's from the center left to progressives or from progressives to the center left. So yeah, I don't really have a lot of patience for that, and to me, it speaks poorly of both of them. But neither of them are my first choice for the primary in 28. So I'm not too pressed about it either way. Brando says, thoughts on Peter Thiel's influence on politics. So yeah, Peter Thiel is cuckoo's bananas. He is having a deleterious effect on politics. He is using his billions of dollars to try to exert pressure on politicians to buy elections. He has really weird beliefs about the Antichrist. He wants like a techno dictatorship future where him and his other tech billionaire buddies will be like the new kings and queens of the various states of America. And yeah, so yeah, do not trust, do not endorse, Anybody that has this endorsement is sus as hell. And yeah, what we need to do is regulate and tax the tech industry so that they cannot have this kind of effect on our politics going forward. And thank you very much, Muzz King, for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. All right, no, not a corny username says opinion on Israel. I am completely fine with the country of Israel and its citizens, but I am staunchly against the ruling party of Israel. The Netanyahu government is extremely right wing. They are doing war crimes and genocide on the people of Palestine. So I think we can support the people living in Israel, but also be accurately critical of the government of Israel. All right, Millie Mayer says thoughts on rumors of Zelensky's being pushed out of leadership. I mean, this is part of the Russian playbook, so it's unclear how much of this is organic and how much of it is just a psyop by Russia. Because if there's an election, then Russia will have a chance to poison the well a little bit more, maybe get one of their loyalists installed as president of Ukraine instead of Zelensky, and then that president will happily roll over for Putin and, you know, just like let them take back all of Ukraine into Russia. Yeah, and that's what Putin wants. He wants there to be places where he can exert influence and potentially, you know, install loyalists in the Ukrainian government. But yeah, you know, as far as I know from whatever polling has been able to happen in a country that is currently being invaded, it seems like the population is very happy with Zelensky and what he is doing. There's that corruption scandal that happened that involved a member of his team, but notably not Zelensky himself. While those allegations appear to be legitimate, the, you know, uncovering of that seems a little sus, you know, the timing of it, because, you know, this is something that Russia is really good at doing. They're really good at fomenting internal conflicts. Okay, Millie May says, do you think Zelensky is a good leader? I do. I do also. William Tell says, have you looked up Nathan Gill in Great Britain, Russia? Don't know anything about that. Real Benda says, would you send your children on birthrights? Probably not. Okay, Bitneva says, Alina Habba just resigned. Will her staff be overturned? Can we do the same with Bondi? No. The mechanism by which Alina Habba had to resign is different than the mechanism by which Bondi would need to. And it's right now, it doesn't seem like Bondi's in any danger whatsoever. Real Bendis says, did you see the SNL skit on Pete Hegseth? I must see, so funny. I have not seen that one yet. Anthony Murphy says, why do we give tens of billions of dollars of tax dollars to Israel? So there are a bunch of reasons why politicians do that, Anthony Murphy. Some of them are good faith, some of them are not good faith. I don't think that we should. I mean, technically we shouldn't, just because we have a law that says that if a nation's government is guilty of doing war crimes or genocide, then we are not legally allowed to send them any money or weapons. And so, yeah, I 100% think that we should stop doing that. Watley TV says, so going to totally skip over the fact that Ukraine is the nature gas hub for the EU. LOL. Okay. Why? I don't understand why that is a relevant thing. Millie May says, thoughts on Jared Kushner going to Russia on behalf of USA and Trump. So yeah, Jared Kushner does not have a position in the government. He is a private business person who is also the son-in-law of the president of the United States. Him and a bunch of Trump's buddies are sort of like bouncing all over the globe as shadow secretaries of state so that they can do business deals where their leverage is that they have the ear of the president of the United States, which is just like one of the most wildly and obviously corrupt things that we have seen in American government in potentially its history. So yeah, America should be really pissed off about that. Like, how much of our taxpayer dollars are going to Jared Kushner and Donald Trump becoming richer? How much are we throwing other people under the bus just so that Russia can get a deal with Kushner and the Saudis and shit like that? Like, it's fucking disgusting, man. John Abbott, good to see you again. Average Joe, good to see you again. In terms of importance, how would you rate the following issues: congressional term limits, campaign finance reform, and wealth tax reforms? I probably just like flip it. Exactly. I think congressional term limits is probably on the bottom. Wealth tax is going to be huge. You don't technically need campaign finance reform if you are able to get rid of income inequality. But 100% campaign finance reform is up there so long as billionaires exist. William Tell says, did you see the video of hungover Boris Johnson meeting alone with Russian agents? I have not. Toy Yaid says, "What is APAC? APAC is a lobbying organization, and most of them are not good. So like Heritage Foundation is bad. Federalist Society is bad. Those are all lobbying organizations that use money in order to exert influence over our elected leaders. APAC is specifically a lobbying organization that lobbies on behalf of the relationship between America and Israel. It is funded by American billionaires' money, and so it does not need to register as an agent of a foreign nation. But it's also, it's a very far-right organization. They take down politicians that they don't like, that they do not believe are significantly, or what's the word I'm looking for? Significantly bending the knee to the Netanyahu government, adequately sending, enthusiastically sending money and weapons over to Israel. They will put a ton of money into primaries for those politicians. The road is littered with the body of politicians that tried to stand up to Israel and APAC. They're extremely powerful lobbying organization, very well funded, and they have a really good track record of losing politicians their elections. It's part of the reason why I don't think it's like 100% disqualifying when Democrats take APAC money, because not all of them can afford to go to war with APAC just to win their elections. Okay, Lauren, good to see you again. Mark says, do you think Trump will get impeached? Not if Democrats don't take back the House. Republicans are not going to impeach Donald Trump. They're just not. And that is part of the reason why I don't think that people should vote for them, because you should impeach a president who has done impeachable things, regardless of if they are in your party or not. So yeah, if Democrats win back the House in 26, Donald Trump is getting impeached 100% without question. He probably won't get removed from office because Democrats probably won't have enough seats to do that. In fact, it's very likely that they won't have enough seats to do that, but he's 100% getting impeached again if Democrats win the midterms. Mick Sauce says, where do you see Fuentes in 5 to 10 years? I mean, hopefully he, loses all of his influence and starts working at a gas station. But where do I think he's going to be? I have no idea. Rouse says, thoughts on AI and UBI? Artificial intelligence needs to get regulated. Right now, Americans are paying higher electric bills just so that they can help AI billionaires pay for their, massive electrical costs for their fucking data centers. Like, it's unconscionable. They're extremely susceptible to misinformation. People can have their political opinions swayed by AI. So who controls what an AI says is also really important to regulate. And, as AI becomes better and better and it starts, erasing jobs, then we are going to have to start supplementing people's income with universal basic income so that we don't have just hordes of people dying on the street of starvation and exposure. It's, I think it is extremely worrying that this AI boon is happening right now under a Republican administration who really doesn't give a shit about American citizens dying in the streets of hunger or because they don't have a house or because they can't get health care. They're just going to tell those people, like, go get a job, and then we'll all say there are no jobs because of AI. And they go, well, some people have jobs. Why don't you work harder? Maybe you can get that person's job. They're going to try to get us to fucking, battle royale for the few jobs that are left for us all to get. There's that movie that's coming out called No Other Choice or something, about a dude in, I want to say, Korea who goes after all of his competition for a job that he's applying to. That's the future that the Republican Party wants. Shawnee Bear says, thoughts on RAM prices skyrocketing because of AI? I mean, that's the free market for you, because AI wants all of the RAM so that they can control our collective future. Now nobody gets RAM, Thank you, Rouse. Dylan Underwood says, do we truly believe either political party ever truly care about working class people? Yes, Dylan Underwood, I do. You can tell by their policies, you can tell by their platform, you can tell by the outcomes. There are exceptions, of course, but if you look at Democratic governments at both the federal and state level, working class people get better taken care of under Democrats than Republicans. And as far as who fucks over the working class more, it's not even fucking close. Republican platform, Republican administrations, both on the federal and state level, fuck over the working class and the poor way more than the Democratic Party does. Okay, Dylan Underwood says, okay, so this guy is still in belief of our political system. I don't trust this logic. I mean, I'm just using facts, Dylan Underwood. Like, if you want me to go through more specifics, like specific ways in which Republicans have fucked over the working class and the poor, and specific ways in which the Democratic Party has helped the working class and the poor, I'm happy to do that. But if you're just somebody who just like blindly assumes the most cynical and pessimistic version of things, then there's nothing I can do to change that opinion of yours. All right, loading says totally wrong. Stop victim mindset. Strategize jobs to use AI. Don't become obsolete. Many new AI jobs. That is inaccurate. Loading. There are too many jobs that can and will be lost to mechanization and AI. Then we will be able to replace. Soy says, why Democrats hate America? Democrats don't hate America. Cole Robertson says, why do politicians not use logic or philosophy in the ways our government was thought of when created? Because politics doesn't always line up with logic and philosophy. Sometimes politicians need to make decisions to win elections that maybe are not, they don't fully, adhere to the logic of just doing what's best for the country. Sophia says, what are your thoughts on defund the police? So defund the police it was not like something that the Democratic Party focus grouped or even adopted. It was what a bunch of activists were chanting at protests because they were tired of police doing violence against innocent people, mostly people of color. I don't believe that defund the police is a policy that any politician on the left actually has. I think the most extreme Democrat, their policy is in more expanding the different kinds of community officers that we have available. The big, the big proof point for this is that police officers are not trained to deal with mental health crises. For example, if somebody's having a psychotic episode on the street, who do you call? You call the police, and police aren't really trained to handle that. So politicians on the left have been saying, like, why don't we have a different group of people that we call out for, specifically for people having nervous breakdowns in public? And that way, the police don't have to go do things that are dangerous for them because they're not trained on how to handle that. Let me know what you think about that, Sophia, and it's really great to see you again. Sophia says, but most Democratic politicians don't care about law enforcement. That is not true, Sophia. Democratic politicians do care about protecting our law enforcement, and the idea that Democrats don't is right-wing propaganda. Loading says, no, I am an AI data privacy patent attorney. I work with this daily, many new jobs, trust me. All right, well, first of all, that's what's called anecdotal evidence. Just because it's what you're seeing does not mean that it is accurate. Number two, you're a stranger on the internet. You could say that you are whoever you want to be, and there would be no way for us to fact check you. So, I'm sure that there are people who are arguing exactly what you're saying, Loading, but it does not appear to be the case that there will be enough jobs for every human being on the planet if we just let AI play out the way that it is. Isaac says, in Mamdani's speech, he said he wanted to. He said he wanted to what? More ridiculous says, so train part of the police department to handle those situations. I mean, right now we're just splitting hairs here. More ridiculous. Like, I'm saying have a separate group of people that are already trained for that. And you're saying, well, why don't we have two types of police? Ones that do that and ones that don't do that. It's like, it's the same policy, basically. Like, we agree with each other. Terrible Angel says, did you see Alex Karp flailing around in that interview? No, I did not. Isaac says, defund the police, and so has Joe Biden. No, that is inaccurate, Isaac. Super Zerone says, what are the bad things about politics? Money. I would say money is mainly the worst thing in politics. More Ridiculous says, are you going to train them how to handle the violent ones threatening lives? Yeah, that's what people that work in mental health care are trained to do. Ruben says, your thoughts on National Socialism. I believe National Socialism is what the Nazi Party called themselves, so if I'm remembering that correctly, I'm against it. Ian Niles says, Portland, Oregon had this group and has been dismantled several times under Democratic leadership. I don't know what that means, Ian Niles. Gabe says, why do you care about politics if it's all artificial? It's not all artificial. Politics does decide whether or not people have hard or easy lives, whether you get persecuted for the color of your skin, your religion, your sexuality, or not. And so how our lives are, cost of living, access to healthcare, available housing, all of that has to do with who's in office. And we need to be able to discuss what they are doing, what their platforms are, what their ideas are, so that we can make informed decisions as to who to vote for in the future. Alrighty, let's see here over on Twitch and YouTube. John says, the only way AI generates as many new jobs as it destroys is if it is so bad at the job it's made to do, that everyone who used to just do the jobs is now getting hired to fix the AI's mistake. I tend to agree with that, John Abbott. Average Joe says, regarding Fuentes, I don't see him ever being condemned by anyone on the right. Politicians know they need his ideological followers to win. We saw this when Republicans accepted the MAGA wing. If the Dems done this with the Bernie wing, I think 2024 would have been different. Your thoughts? It's interesting, but where the Republican Party doesn't seem to be as hindered by intra-party fighting, like between the centrists and the Fuentes' wing. And I mean, you could make an argument that all they do is they just acquiesce to the most radical version. I think that the Democratic Party still needs its centrist wing, and you know, I think there was the potential to turn off more voters who wanted to vote for Democrats but were scared about them being too far to the left. Then I think there was a worry that a more centrist Dem would turn off people on the left, and that kind of plays out in some of the polling. Like, I'm sure you heard me talk about that one stat that says that more than half of Americans believe the Democratic Party has gone too far to the left already. So yeah, my personal beliefs. I'm much more of a Bernie Democrat than a centrist Democrat, but there are not. I do not represent the majority of Americans, and so I think it's important that we remain a big tent that has the centrist Democrats in it and also the far left. All right, Harry Peters says, how do you feel about the rise of Islam in the U.S.? The same way I feel about the rise of any religion in the U.S., which is like you're allowed to celebrate whatever religion you want, and if one religion becomes more popular than another religion, that's just the free market of ideas, I guess. Kyler Woolstrom says, do you support ICE? No, I do not. They are a rogue agency who are acting barbarically and illegally. Right. Sav says, Trump is flaunting a ballroom in front of Americans while the working class is struggling. That is accurate, Sav. Gigi says, are Democrats even trying to remove this regime? I would think E-Files Caribbean would be enough. 100% Democrats are trying, but they don't have any political power right now. They are in the minority everywhere. And so if Americans gave the Democratic Party more political power, then they would be able to remove this regime more effectively. Sean says, America vote with knowledge, not emotion. Emotions cloud the clarity of good judgment. That is accurate. Okay. Scrolling down to the bottom. Callie Griffin, good to see you again, says, by global standards, U.S. Democrats are center to right. We're not left enough. I don't 100% agree with that, Callie. I'm sure that there are some Democrats like, Schumer and Pelosi who fit that description, but, your progressive wing, I think, is probably pretty in line with the global left. Sam says, why do independent parties never get any support from media or any other tool? It is mathematically impossible for independent parties to win nationally until we have ranked choice voting. Sav says, what do you think about Trump toying with the idea of sending our military into Gaza? I think it's an idea. I think it's an example of the blatant hypocrisy of Trump and his administration, that he's supposed to be the peace president who's ending all the forever wars. And meanwhile, he is inflaming tensions in the Middle East. He is doing nothing to end the war in Ukraine. His idea of ending a war is giving the more popular, the more powerful group leverage to end the war. Basically, it's fucking stupid. El Avici says Gaza should be destroyed. What a shitty thing to say. I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask a question and not be a jerk, LEVC. But if you keep on saying stuff like that, I'm going to boot you. Sophia says, so you disagree with deporting criminals who broke our border security laws. So Sophia, most of what ICE is doing is not deporting criminals who broke our border security laws. And I know that we get our news from different places, so you're probably going to be very skeptical that what I'm telling you is accurate, but almost everybody that ICE is detaining or deporting have done nothing wrong. Many of them are legal residents who are working towards becoming citizens. ICE has deported and detained veterans, American citizens, legal residents who have committed no crimes whatsoever. And some people who their only crime was overstaying their welcome or crossing the border illegally. Now, maybe you think that that deserves, swift deportation to a concentration camp in El Salvador. I do not think that that is the case. I think that there is a humane way to deport somebody who has overstayed their welcome or crossed the border illegally. But what ICE is doing is not that. They are a maximalist position where they are torturing people and people who have done absolutely nothing wrong. Even American citizens who have done nothing wrong are getting detained and tortured by ICE. And I would love to send you evidence of that, Sophia, if you are open to hearing evidence of that. John Abbott says ICE is literally grabbing people while they're standing in line and waiting for their naturalization ceremony. Yeah, people who have done 99% of the work to become citizens, ICE is grabbing them, detaining them, torturing them, deporting them, and in some cases disappearing them, which is really terrifying. We should all be terrified of that. All right, Sav says, what is your view on a felon not owning a firearm but can have the codes to nuclear weapons? I think that if, depending on what a felon was in jail for, I agree that they should not have access to a weapon. If they are, for example, went to jail for domestic abuse or, armed robbery for, murder, things like that. But I also don't think that we should have a convicted felon in charge of the nuclear codes unless they are a convicted felon who, turned their life around and paid their debt to society, which Donald Trump has not done. He has still not faced any accountability or, paid his fair share of for the consequences of his actions. He was just found guilty and then got to be president. Kingston promises, do you live in Portland? No, I do not. Sam says, with dozens of religious groups demanding the Holy Land, will the Middle East ever have peace? I think so, but it's going to take a lot of people doing a lot of work. Kingdom promises, you should be ashamed. Disappearing? Yeah, they have. And if you'd like me to send you that information, I'm happy to, Kingston. Hand Liar says, you have no idea what you're talking about. I have lots of ideas about what I'm talking about. Sophia says, but ICE is allowed to detain anybody. They just can't deport legal people. So, Sophia, that is actually not true. So ICE is allowed to detain anybody because the current government is under the purview of Trump and the Republicans. But what ICE is doing is illegal. Like, you're not just allowed to grab people without, identifying yourself as law enforcement. You're not allowed to grab people who, there's no warrant out for their arrest. And they are deporting legal people. They are 100% deporting people who are here legally, who have done nothing wrong. That is 100% happening, Sophia. Okay, scrolling down to the bottom, Turtle and a Half Shell says, the big problem is some of these people like that these people are being tortured. Some of the problem is that some of these people like that these people are being tortured. Yes, that is a problem, and I would hope that those people who might look at a brown person being tortured will recognize that that is not how Jesus Christ would feel about that. All right, Chumalongadong says, liberal mindset with no true knowledge. That is not a question, and also it is inaccurate, so you're out of here. Slay and Ace says, show me the cases where U.S. citizens are being deported. If you send me a DM, Slay and Ace, I will happily send you that information. You're not going to DM me, though, because you don't care about it. Sam Digital says, how do you feel about the new executive order to block state regulations on AI? I do not believe that executive order has any legal standing. It is evidence that Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about how wildly disruptive AI is going to be for working class and poor Americans, how destabilizing it could potentially be for our politics and increasing divisiveness and political violence. So yeah, it's stupid. He's corrupt. It's going to hurt people. It may or may not stand depending on how shitty the Supreme Court decides to be on that day. Sophia says, if you don't mind, could you show me evidence of legal people being deported? Absolutely, Sophia. Send me a DM. I don't have time to do that in the middle of the live stream, but I'm happy to send you that information if you send me a DM. The DM is also sort of like it's sort of like your buy-in to my effort. Like, there are plenty of people who will tell me they want evidence of things, and then I'll send it to them, and then they'll just call me a cuck afterwards. So it's like, prove to me that you actually want to know by sending me a DM. Robert says, president is corrupt. Look at Tim Walz. There's no evidence that Tim Walz has done anything corrupt, Robert. And Donald Trump has a crypto coin and is selling pardons for millions of dollars. That is like the textbook definition of corruption. Righty. John Abbott says, if these people were criminals, we wouldn't be making them citizens. That is accurate. Nets Clip says, why do you never speak out against the last administration when people got deported wrongly? I would say Nets clips that there was a difference between what the Biden administration did to deport people and what the Trump administration is doing to deport people. And you know, if you had asked me how I felt at the time during the Biden administration about mistakes that ICE, or you know, not mistakes, but intentional malfeasance that ICE was doing during the Biden administration, or border security, or whatever, whether it was sanctioned by Biden or not, I would 100% have spoken out against that. Slay and Ace says, how about Obama deporting? Again, it's different. You know, we're talking about leagues of magnitude difference in barbaric, violent, illegal, unsanctioned activity by ICE and Border Patrol versus what happened during the Biden and Obama administration. If you would like me to go into more detail on that, I can. But a lot of people on the right will just point out that Biden and Obama also deported people, as though that is the same as building concentration camps here in America, as though that is the same as deporting people who are here legally, as though it is the same as sending people to concentration camps in other countries, et cetera, et cetera. Daniel Lehman says, what do you think about Democratic leadership having the lowest approval rating in history? I think that we judge the Democratic Party by a way higher standard than we judge the Republican Party, and so it tracks. Billionaire dollars are being fire hosed into social media in order to make everybody think the Democratic Party is worse than it actually is. And so all of that makes sense to me. Netsclip says, weird how you never spoke out once, though. Not one repost seems pretty weird. I believe you'll find it if you look, Netsclips. Toby Lee says, what concentration camps are you talking about? Alligator Auschwitz, for example. CCOT is another. Kingdom Promise says, disappearing is the code word for killing them. Choose your words better. No, disappearing just means disappearing. It means we don't know where they are. Were they sold into slavery? Were they human trafficked? Were they murdered? Were they just sent to a country that they don't speak the language, have never been to in their entire fucking lives? Disappearing could be a whole bunch of different things. Sent to Guantanamo. Alex Legault says, there are pictures of Obama's making people sleep on the floor with one meal a day. Trump gave beds. That is inaccurate. Alex, please do not spend any more of this information, any more time spreading misinformation. Nets Clips, you're getting blocked. Congratulations. Ian Niles says, host, who do you know that's been deported? I don't know anybody personally, Ian Niles. Do you think that makes it, what I'm saying, more accurate or less accurate? Eyes Lee says, is it possible that they do know and they just don't want to admit it? That's even more scary. It's very possible. Absolutely. A lot of Hector says, is true Trump have a huge contract to Trump Jr.'s company, Vulcan? Oh, 100%. Yeah. If Trump Jr. uses his connections with his dad, the president, to get a military contract for his company, then the Trump family is making money off of Trump being president. Like, that is just, yeah, absolutely. Sophia says, Alligator Alcatraz is better than many U.S. citizen prisons. So, Sophia, again, that is inaccurate. Alligator Alcatraz, I like to call it Alligator Auschwitz because it's way closer to being a concentration camp than being a prison, had to actually get shut down because of the human rights violations that were going on in there. I don't know if they've reopened it or if they are storing people there illegally, but no, Alligator Alcatraz is not a better place to be than many prisons that Americans are in. Now, it's possible that there are prisons that are worse than Alligator Auschwitz, but that does not like meet the standard of American prisons. American prisons are like hellholes, generally speaking. But some of them are worse than others. If we were grading all prison facilities, Alligator Alcatraz would be at the very bottom of the list. But there might be some other prisons down there as well. Okay, let's see here. Kelly Griffin says, my question is, why are these foreign countries accepting deportations that aren't from their countries? Because we're paying them, Kelly Griffin. The Trump administration is bribing despots in other countries to take migrants and citizens and legal residents of America. It is disgusting. It is corrupt. It is a massive waste of taxpayer dollars. Yeah, it's dumb. It's wrong. I can't say enough negative things about it. Thank you, Miss Weaver Bay, and thank you, Sylvie Bedolio, for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. All right, let's see here. TL says, why isn't your precious news station CNN and MSNBC broadcasting the affordability roundtable? I don't know anything about that, TL. I don't know what the affordability roundtable is. My precious CNN and MSNBC are not my precious news stations. I get my news from a variety of sources that actually almost never include CNN very specifically. TL says it's going on right now talking about the affordability problem in the United States. Okay, so I don't understand why you think it is a problem that certain news organizations are not covering this thing that may or may not be huge news. Like I don't know what you're getting at here, TL. Triskafan says the way these comments are so full of MAGAs is not giving me much hope for humankind. Well, a lot of them are just bots from Russia and India, so we don't really need to waste any time or energy on them. All right, let's see here. Ian Niles says sources but can't name sources. All right, well, send me a DM if you want my sources, Ian Niles. You won't because you don't really give a shit. You're just here to sling mud, as the expression goes. All right, and thank you, Kate the Grateful, for helping me reach my fourth gift goal of the day. Okay. Steven77 says skips over the truth comments. If you are, what is it that you think I skipped over that you are upset about, Stevens? TL says most older people get their information off of the news. Okay, I don't understand what you're trying to get at there. Are no news organizations covering it, TL? Is it who's holding it? Is it Trump? Paul says you're well informed. I am. Thank you very much. Okay. Bet your run says bid guy. Nothing. I don't know what that's in reference to. A lot of Hector says, what's the plan when Social Security runs out of money in 2033? I mean, my plan would be to tax the billionaires and then fund it that way. Penis is broke says, you are Dean. No, I'm not. Ian Now says, trusting news is not being well informed. I mean, if you get news from multiple sources, you can generally trust the news. Rena says, Newsmax has it on, LOL. Oh, okay, so it's a right-wing propaganda thing, is what you're upset about. The CNN and MSNBC not covering. Sylvia says, so basically you have an issue with how ISIS handles deportations, but not deportations themselves, right? Yeah, 100%. If they are being done legally and humanely, then 100% deport people who do not belong here. If somebody is guilty of doing a crime here in America, send them home. Like, yeah, 100%. No issues there. Okay, Mike J says, thoughts on a world government potentially being formed? I mean, hopefully humans will continue to work together and, find peace and understandings to the point where we don't maybe one day need the separation of nations. But I don't really see that happening anytime in the near future. Okay, LJ Up says you can tax the billionaires at 100% and that will not fix the Social Security problem. So LJ, that is inaccurate. We can 100% fund Social Security, all welfare programs, free public college, free healthcare, with just raising taxes on the top 1%. Paul says that affordability was a hoax. Why right-wing coverage? Yeah. Isn't it weird that Newsmax is covering the Trump administration trying to solve a problem that it says does not exist and is just a left-wing hoax? John Abbott says, do you use Ground News? Yes, I do. I really like Ground News. Average Joe says, isn't it just more likely that those who criticize Hunter Biden, Pelosi, and Walz for corruption, but not Trump, his cabinet, or his family, simply believe that it's only okay for their side to do it? Oh, I'm sure that some of them do feel that way, Average Joe, but a lot of people just don't see those stories because of where they get their news. Again, right-wing news is the least accurate news that you can get. It does not cover negative stories about people on the right. Steven77 says, this is like watching CNN. No, it's like watching CNN is that video I made, fucking your mom. Toby Lee says, why aren't liberal media covering Minnesota corruption? They have. I read about that story on the Associated Press. What the right wing is doing is blaming it on Tim Walz. And there's really no evidence that he had anything to do with it or that it was his negligence that allowed it to happen. Okay. Ian Now says, listening to one side of the news is being biased. I mean, there's a difference between rejecting right-wing media and only listening to one side of the news. Like, if you get your news from legacy media, centrist media, progressive media, foreign media, then you're not listening to one side of the news. But right-wing media is inaccurate right-wing propaganda. Like, there's no news value to it. It is substanceless. It's like eating a Twinkie, basically. Ian Niles says, I get my info from firsthand experience, not the news. Well, then there are a lot of things that you are going to have zero knowledge of because you will not able to experience everything that is happening in the world at the same time. Sophia says, well, then I think we have a lot of common ground on immigration because I think I agree with your stance. That is exactly what I'm doing here, Sophia. I think that people on the right, and you, again, you described yourself last time as MAGA, so I'm not trying to disparage you by saying that you're a person on the right, but a lot of people on the right have wrong ideas about what the Democratic Party platform is, about what Democratic citizens believe, what we vote for in the primary and stuff like that. And so what I'm doing on here is trying to be the regular ass Democrat that some people on the right are being told does not exist. Alrighty, let's see here. Scott Clower says, thoughts on Don Jr. getting $620 million from the Pentagon? It is hardcore corruption, plain and simple. Don Jr. started a company that got a military contract while his dad was president. So Donald Trump and his family are profiting off of him being president. It is a textbook definition of a violation of the Emoluments Clause. It is blanket, obvious corruption, plain and simple. Everybody should be pissed about this. And the fact that Republicans in Congress aren't doing anything to stop it. To me, this completely invalidates the Republican Party, and nobody should vote for any of their politicians ever again. Toby Lee says, your primary vote means nothing. The voter doesn't control it. Yes, it does, Toby Lee. Aurora says, what is your most controversial political take? The Democratic Party is better than people think it is. The Republican Party is worse than people think it is. Democrats never get any credit. Republicans never get any blame. We hold the Democratic Party to an impossibly high standard, and we cannot lower the bar fast and low enough for the Republican Party. Okay. Spice King says, what about Hunter UDFs? I think you probably mean dumb fuck there. Hunter Biden was not in business with his dad. Don Jr. is in business with his dad. Hunter Biden, it was never proven, profited off of the presidency in any way other than saying, hey, my dad's president. He never got any favors or military contracts. There is no evidence that Biden was involved in any of Hunter's business dealings, but there is a ton of evidence that Donald Trump is involved in his kids' business dealings. So, they're different. They're different. They're worse. They're different. Todd Gaultier is calling me a liar. That's an example of a blockable comment. Toby Lee is also saying false. Again, those are not questions, so you're out of here. Sophia says, do you believe white privilege is actually a real thing? So, Sophia, this might be a place where we disagree, because I believe that there is ample evidence that white privilege is actually a real thing. That does not mean that every white person's life is easy, but it does mean that on average, white people have an easier life than people of color. If you want me to go into more specifics than that, I am happy to. Kate the Grateful says, everywhere. I don't read right wing because they are proven to contain the most propaganda by far. That is 100% accurate. Mr. Too Distinguished says, great debate, brother. Stay strong. You keep doing what you do. Thank you, Mr. Distinguished. Okay, Ian Now says, I'd have more respect for this host if he didn't trust one source. I don't trust one source. I get my information from lots of different sources. Eyes Lee says, if primaries don't count, how come Donald Jr. got to be president? I mean, that's exactly right, Eyes Lee. Okay, Donnie Wood says, love you guys, handed to a high standard. Why don't you talk about taking the government hostage? Handed to a high standard. Why don't you talk about taking the government hostage? Are you talking about the shutdown? Donnie Woods, are you still even here, or did you just pop in here to call me a biased liar and then dip out? Let me know. I will happily respond to that. Cavante Harris says, what's your favorite show? Oh, I like shows like 30 Rock, and I like Slow Horses, and what else is really good these days? The Chair Company, I Think You Should Leave. All great. William Tell says, have you listened to the podcast Burn Order by Rachel Maddow? Is that the new one, or is that one of her old ones? I listened to both seasons of Ultra, and I fucking loved them, and I'm looking forward to the new one. But if that's an older one, then I'll definitely check that out. Mike Green says, does it really matter the news source if you have just basic common sense? 100%, Mike Green. We are all susceptible to believing misinformation if we're not careful. And so if you're just getting your news from one source, you are in danger of believing something that is inaccurate. Margie the Cat says, was going to scroll but stayed. I like the discussion. Thank you, Margie the Cat. Brandon Walker says, interest and corporate lobbies. What about them? Sammy says, should we be worried about war? 100%. And you should call your representatives and let them know that you want Congress to do its job and stop Donald Trump from starting wars in South America. Sophia says, so if white privilege is real, then can you name something I can do that a person of color cannot do? You know, Sophia, the odds that you will get pulled over by a police officer as a white person are significantly lower than a brown person. The odds that you will survive being pulled over by a police officer are a lot higher than a person of color getting pulled over by a police officer. They've done studies, even in 2025, if you have a name that sounds ethnic, foreign, urban, then you are less likely to get an interview at a job. That discrimination still happens. Sophia, let me know what you think about that. Okay, let's see here. User a bunch of numbers says, are you a liberal who believes the government should regulate gun ownership? I am a Democrat who believes the government should regulate gun ownership. User a whole bunch of numbers. Do you not? Let's talk about it. Okay, over on Twitch, Jonathan Swift says, what do you think about the two-state solution? So the two-state solution was a very good idea, and it was something that any politician in America could say to communicate that both they believe that the people in Israel should be able to stay where they are, but also that Israel should be recognizing the sovereignty of the Palestinians. At the moment, the Netanyahu government, some people believe, has been really effective at making a two-state solution basically impossible right now because you can't get one contiguous state for the Palestinian people. Like, they have annexed enough territory that it is unfeasible to do that. That's not my opinion. That is the opinion of people who study this issue very closely. And so we need to think of a different solution. Like, it is no longer acceptable for politicians just to say, why can't we do a two-state solution? Okay. Scrolling down to the bottom. Ian Niles says, host says first-hand experience is not good source. Only sources are good sources. That's not what I said. Ian Niles, not what I said. Ian Niles, you're pretty sus, and I am pretty close to blocking you. You are on your third strike, just letting you know. If you say that you don't read the news, Ian, but that you only get all of your experience from, you get all of your news from firsthand experience, then how can you tell what is going on in Israel, in Ukraine, in Asia, in the Antarctic? Like, are you out there personally inspecting all of the icebergs to see if climate change is real? Like, you gotta trust some sources besides your own eyeballs. Alrighty, let's see here. Andy says we need a two-country solution. That's pretty funny. Okay, Joey A says well-regulated militia. Exactly. User a bunch of numbers says, so you trust Trump to hold the sole monopoly on gun ownership? No, I do not. Alrighty, let's see here. Mason says people of color at the job I work at are more likely to be watched by the security, and I've seen it. Yeah, that is accurate as well. Triska Fallon says, what's happening with the plan from Russia to end the Ukraine war? It got buried in the news this weekend. So Marco Rubio, so basically the Trump administration they had a quote unquote plan for how to solve the Russia invading Ukraine war. And it was basically just what Russia wanted. And they put it forward as their peace plan. It was a giveaway to Russia, which has been every single one of the Trump administration's quote unquote peace plans for Ukraine, is give Russia whatever it wants. Marco Rubio took that and tried to make it more of our plan and made like some changes to it. I think it went from being a 28-point plan to being a 20-point plan. And Russia said that they're not going to do that. So we're still back at square one. We are back on the drawing board. Sophia says, why does the Democratic Party seem to get offended by small things way easier than Republicans. Sophia, I don't agree that they do. Donald Trump uh, put tariffs on Canada because he didn't like an ad that was running in Canada. He put tariffs on Brazil because their previous leader was guilty of treason, and they held him legally accountable for that. But that was Donald Trump's buddy, so he put tariffs on them. The Republican Party is notoriously thin-skinned. I'm trying to think of like specific politicians as opposed to like commentators, but think about all the things that people on the right have decided to boycott because they didn't like that a trans person was, advertising Bud Lights and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think the Democrats are too sensitive or even more sensitive than the Republican Party, or people, the voters on both sides. I think are equally sensitive. Okay, Mike Green says, did you hear how they are trying to blame Tim Walz for the Somalian fraud case? What did you say? I did hear about that, and there's no evidence that he had anything to do with it, or that it was his incompetence or negligence that allowed it to happen. And it's evidence that the propaganda is working even on us regular people, that we're even calling it the Somali fraud case because the dude who was in charge of the whole thing was a fucking white guy. There were Somalians who were on it, but the head of it was some white dude. So it should just be called the white dude Minnesota fraud case. Okay, let's see here. Alain says, how long do you think it would take for the U.S. to potentially go through a second civil war? I'm not really sure if you're asking me how long it would take for the war to start or how long the war would go on for. Yeah, it is. It would be a bad thing. We should all try to avoid a civil war at all costs. All right, back over to Twitch. JP says, look at all the sensitive people in the chat who say you're wrong and then dip. That's pretty funny, JP. John Abbott says, gun rights in the U.S. are already an illusion. None of us actually have a right to own guns. Oh, that's really interesting take, John Abbott. What's your justification for that? Because I've never heard that take before. JP says, Jimmy John is a very knowledgeable man. I get all my information from him. That's pretty funny. Jonathan Swift says, how can we avert World War III? So I think, number one, we need to eliminate corruption from government, because when you have corrupt autocrats like Donald Trump, like Vladimir Putin at the helm, then you have business interests that are incentivized to go to war that are then ramping up international conflicts. You need smart people doing diplomacy and exercising soft American power instead of what Trump is doing. The model for avoiding World War III was set by the Obama administration, naturalizing relations with Cuba, a nuclear treaty with Iran that was going to keep them from getting a nuclear weapon. Now they are months away, maybe, because the Trump administration threw that agreement in the garbage for some fucking reason. Doing something about climate change is also going to stop World War III from happening, because a lot of this global tension is going to be ramped up when we have fewer resources available, which climate change is going to do. Okay. Average Joe says, I feel like there's too many people that don't learn about Black World War II vets not being allowed to use the GI Bill. Voting restrictions intended to reduce Black voters, physical redlining, and economic redlining, credit scores and payday loans, debt traps, etc. 100%, Average Joe. The number of people in America who are uninformed about the suffering of marginalized communities today and in the past is too few. Yeah, we're not throwing any tea or shade at you, Sophia. Just letting you know. You're here, you're asking questions in good faith. There's no judgments whatsoever. You're a superstar. Oh, okay, back into the TikTok comments. Real Bendis says, should John McCain have picked Joe Lieberman as his running mates? Ooh, that's an interesting idea. I mean, yes, if only to not have given air to Sarah Palin becoming a national celebrity. That was a bad move, I should say. GI Robot says, quick reminder, 5 days since Trump had his pulse checked while sleeping at a presser on national television. Ooh, that's interesting. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's interesting. Butch says, spoiled know-it-all. Are you talking about me? I don't think I'm spoiled. I mean, I waited tables for 12 years. That's a very unspoiling, type type of occupation, shall we say. Sophia says, I'm from Alabama, but when I visit blue states, prices are way higher. Why do Democrats support raising prices? So, Sophia, you know how much I appreciate you being here. It is a little, it's a little leading to say that Democrats support raising prices. Democrats don't support raising prices. That is not a policy that the Democratic Party has. And if you want me to sort of like talk about why cost of living is where it is, then I will happily do that. It is mostly the fault of the Trump administration and Republican politicians. But why are prices higher in blue areas? Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, blue states tend to be more popular to live in. And so more people want to go there. There's more people demanding resources. Those resources come at a premium then because, that's supply and demand for you. When there's more demand, costs go up. Let's see here. So populations tend to be denser. And so again, because populations are denser in blue cities, then, resources are a premium. And so they go for a higher price. Does this make sense to you, Sophia? Sophia says, but blue states typically always have higher prices, like it's a pattern. Yeah, but that pattern is explained if you look at sort of like the logistical realities of cities and blue states versus more rural and red areas. So yeah, but there's no like blue state policy that increases costs of like food or anything like that. Okay, Jerry Balmesa says blue states pay their workers, offer health, etc. We have higher quality of life in blue states. That is also accurate. Higher standard of living. Yes, that is accurate. Shork says it's like the pattern that connects education level to party affiliation. Yeah, totally. Damar says, I live in Illinois, Missouri birder. Illinois drivers flood over the bridge to buy gas and booze. Yeah, I'm sure it's cheaper in Missouri than it is in Illinois. And Sophia, I hope you are ignoring everybody that is adding you and saying shitty things, because that is not what I am advising anybody in my live stream to do. You are here asking good questions, asking in good faith, not calling anybody a cuck or a liar or a libtard, and so you are welcome to stick around. And for anybody who's here and they see like my preamble during the show, I always say, if you're worried that your question is going to make you sound like a MAGA person or a libtard person, you do not have to worry. You're not going to get judged here. I obviously can't force you guys to adopt that policy also, but that is my policy. Alrighty. John Abbott, yes, say more about it. I know you're saying they don't exist, but say more. I want to know. What would you say to somebody who says that the Second Amendment gives us the right to own a gun? And thank you, Ms. Weaver Bay and Lindsay, for helping me reach I believe that was my 6th gift goal of the day. Okay, let's see here. We probably have time for one more gift goal of the day. Alrighty. Okay, Ari says, what is politics? Politics is how we discuss who and what is governing us. Okay, Rena, perfect mute right there. No notes. Okay, all right. So it looks like comments have kind of slowed down a little bit. So I'm gonna start doing my outro, but get your final questions in. If you like the show and you want to support it financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a store that you can buy things from. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And you can also send gifts and become super fans and subscribers on Twitch and YouTube and TikTok and all the various platforms. Solano says, what is your hope rating right now? 1 to 10. I'd say it's probably like a 7, maybe 6.5. Joe Padilla says, damn it, missed the whole show. Got you here. Good afternoon, sir. Good to see you, Joe. Well, we're not wrapping up yet. We're just doing the outro. Final questions are always taken. I want to say mostly always taken. Sophia says, what do you think of the Democrats who celebrated Charlie Kirk's unaliving? Anybody who celebrates political violence, Sophia, I think sucks 100% without question. But I think we need to look at a couple of different things here, Sophia. Number one, when violence happens against the left, do you see people on the right also celebrating? You know, and there's a difference between people on the internet celebrating and politicians celebrating, or strange bots and paid foreign agitators who say that they're liberals in California saying that they are celebrating versus news reporters or agencies celebrating. If you look at the people who are doing the celebrating, it is generally coming from the higher echelons of the Republican Party, where the Democratic Party condemns all political violence. You got people on the right calling for it and celebrating it. I don't know, Sophia, do you remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband got attacked by that dude with a hammer? Do you remember that story, Sophia? Did that reach you? If I don't know what your, what do you call it? What your media diet is like. But it is possible that you just completely missed that story, So let me know, Sophia. Let's see here. John Abbott tried to avoid auto mod, but probably tripped something up. I'll put the comment on Discord. Thank you, John Abbott. I appreciate that. And thank you, Spiritually Sexy and Joe Padilla, for helping me reach my most recent gift goal. Sophia, still waiting on that response. Let me know if you heard about that story about Nancy Pelosi's husband getting attacked by a hammer, because that is an important piece of data. Cherry says, I call BS also. We Dems want to get along. Alan says, you are so full of it. I don't care about your policy. Alan, what did I say that makes you think that I am full of it? Alan says, wait a second. What about all the latest violence and the 2 political assassinations? Yeah. The Democratic Party didn't want those things to happen, Alan. But there's way more violence perpetuated by right-wing extremists than left-wing extremists. Joe Padilla, thank you so much for helping me reach my most recent gift goal. Alan says they called for it. Who called for it? Richard Chapman says, what do you think of Candace Owens attempting to fill the void of Charlie Kirk? I mean, she's cuckoo's bananas, and I don't think that anybody should listen to her in regards to anything. Okay. Joe Padilla says, what good do the midterms do? The more power that we give the Democratic Party in the midterms, the more we can hold the Trump administration accountable. We can impeach Donald Trump. We can hold hearings. We can subpoena people. There will be more political consequences for ignoring the law and the Constitution if Democrats win the midterms. So 100%, it is essential that we win the midterms. Sophia says, I have heard of it, but I actually don't know much about it, but I'm fully against any form of violence. So, Sophia, did you know that Don Jr. was making jokes about Nancy Pelosi's husband getting attacked by a hammer? I think Paul Pelosi was in his underwear at the time because this guy just invaded their home, so he wasn't expecting anybody there. This dude comes in, Paul Pelosi's in his underwear and gets attacked by a hammer. So Don Jr. put on social media a picture of a hammer and a pair of underwear saying, hey, I'm going as Paul Pelosi for Halloween this year. Does that sound like somebody who really gives a shit about political violence so long as it's happening to the other side? There were 2 state senators who were assassinated and 2 more that got shot in Minnesota recently. And for some reason, we're just sort of ignoring the fact that happened, and instead we just focus on, Charlie Kirk's assassination and the Trump assassination attempts. Donald Trump did not reach out to any of those victims' families because they were on the other team. After the Charlie Kirk assassination, there's a right-wing publication called the Daily Caller. Sophia, let me know if you've ever heard about the Daily Caller or the Daily Wire. Yeah, I think it's the Daily Wire, actually. They published an op-ed after Charlie Kirk got assassinated called I Am Calling for Political Violence. And so if you look at all the things that people, in politics say, whether they are elected politicians or paid commentators like Alex Jones or Steve Bannon, the pattern becomes obvious. that people on the left are condemning political violence of every kind. People on the right are only condemning political violence against themselves. But when it happens against people on the left, they are fine with it. Let me know if that tracks with your experience, Sophia, what you think about that. Again, I can send you any data about this stuff that you like. All you got to do is send me a DM or join the Discord or send me an email through my website. Lika says, I thought Charlie Kirk was also making fun of Mr. Pelosi too. He might have. I don't really remember that specifically. Delano says, where do you think Erica Kirk gets her couch costumes? That's very funny. Lika says, Kirk was celebrated, but Senator killed. No one cared on the Republican side. I think I agree with what you're saying, Lika. Sophia says, yes, I do know about the Daily Wire. I haven't seen that specific post, but I definitely disagree with it. Yeah, so if you can find me, a left-wing person who publishes an op-ed that says something similar that is advocating for political violence, then I will 100% denounce that also, and I will encourage everybody on the left to do so. But we're not really seeing that movement happen on the right. We're not seeing people saying, the Daily Caller, the Daily Wire is bad, and so we don't believe that, kind of thing. All right, everybody. Misadventure, me as an Elevate Adventure says we have lots and lots of receipts. All the Republican politicians, all about Republican political violence. Yes, 100%. Thank you, Mimi. I appreciate you. All right, everybody. Let's continue with the outro. We were able to, finish that. Mia, thank you so much for helping me reach my most recent gift goal. Okay, Emily in the City says, I'm getting sick of them lying, saying we celebrated Kirk's death. BS. We were the only ones to condemn. Okay, so Emily, let me be clear about something, all right? Because there are people on the right who are operating in good faith. They go on the internet after Charlie Kirk gets assassinated and they see people that, have like Kamala Harris profile pictures and they call themselves like the true left or something like that, say celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. We cannot say that random ass people on the internet who are either real people or paid bots from India and Russia or whatever were not saying shitty things about Charlie Kirk after his assassination and we're quote unquote celebrating it. Because we can't control that. We can't control what happens on social media. But here's what we can say. We can say that if you go like to the higher ups, the people with big platforms, all the streamers and content creators and thought leaders and elected politicians and stuff like that, all of those people were condemning political violence against Charlie Kirk. Whereas we can find evidence of people in the same category on the right, like the president or the Daily Wire or, Alex Jones, Elon Musk, etc. We have examples of them calling for violence, not denouncing political violence when it happens against the left, putting out rhetoric that is specifically designed to increase political violence and divisiveness. So while we cannot say that the people on the internet are flawless and that there are no examples of people on the left saying these shitty things, that is, I think, a trap. To try to claim that is a trap. And so we need to be very specific about that because, whose voters are celebrating political violence the most, that just depends on whoever has the most money to pay bots in other countries to do that shit, I think the most accurate thing is that there are shitty people on both sides who are celebrating political violence when it happens to the other side. But what's important is what do the thought leaders say, what do the politicians say, etc. Okay, Sav says, what's your opinion on the transparency of this administration? This is one of the least transparent administrations in American history. They hide things very intentionally because they know that if they did not, they would get into trouble. Okay. All right, everybody, I got to start wrapping things up. Average Joe says, "Is it worth it to keep reminding bad faith contrarians that there's a difference between randos on Twitter promoting violence and prominent political figures promoting violence?" I do think it's worth it because we don't want to be caught claiming something that we cannot prove to be true. Because that is, one example of that is 10 news cycles of right-wing media saying that the left are all hypocrites and they're liars and blah blah blah. I've seen it happen. They stretch the truth in ways that are very unfair. So let us not give them any fodder for that whatsoever. And we got good faith people here like Sophia who she understands the difference between somebody whose screen name is fucking Dem Socialist 8675 and whose profile picture is just Mamdani versus me, who is like here with my real ass face and real ass name on the internet saying I do not condone any political violence whatsoever. Sophia says, "Why is the left so pro-choice when biologically life starts at conception?" So Sophia, this is another place where we might have to just agree to disagree on things because I don't believe that biologically life starts at conception. And not everybody, I actually go so far as to say that most people in America don't believe that life starts at conception. Sophia, this is one of my favorite things to talk about with people on the right because I think there's a difference between policy based on whether we believe that a fetus is a life versus what are the policies that actually decrease the number of abortions that women have. Because if you are somebody who's pro-life, and I'm guessing that you are, Alabama, MAGA, JD Vance fan, saying in your comment that life starts at conception, your goal would be to have fewer abortions in America, right? For women to have fewer abortions. I know your goal is probably 0 abortions, but fewer would be better, right, Sophia? Right. So if you look at the things that Democrats do in power versus the thing that Republicans do when they're in power, what Democrats do actually does decrease the number of abortions that happen because Democrats believe in things like sex education and access to contraception. Those things keep accidental pregnancies from happening, which decreases the number of abortions that happen. We also advocate for and attempt to do things like raise the minimum wage and strengthen unions to put more money in the pocket of people who are poor. And one of the main reasons that people get abortions is because they feel like they can't afford to have a kid financially. And so if we make those resources available to poor people who are pregnant, then they won't feel that they have to go out there and get abortion. But then if we look at what Republicans do, Republicans just criminalize it, right? Like all they do is they make it illegal. And they make it illegal in like really big ways. Like there are ways in which the Republican Party will say things like, exceptions for the health and safety of the mother, exceptions in the case of rape and incest, but then legislatively it doesn't really match, And so what you find is that Republicans trying to ban abortion doesn't actually decrease the number of abortions or even stop abortions. I should have flipped that. It does not stop abortions or even decrease the number of abortions. All it does is make pregnancy more dangerous for women. So if banning abortion doesn't actually decrease the number of abortions, and also it makes pregnancy more dangerous for women who want to have children, then what value do these abortion bans have? I would much rather say, let's make it so that nobody is so poor that they can't afford to have a kid that they want. Let's make it so that everybody has access to contraception and family planning and sex education so that we can stop accidental pregnancies from happening. I should also say, Sophia, and I don't even know if you're still here, but it's not just that Democrats advocate for those things, but the Republican Party actively works against them. So, like, why would the Republican Party be pushing for both abortion bans and not having access to sex education, not having access to cheap or free contraception, not raising the minimum wage, not strengthening unions, not giving child care and the child tax credit and things like that. What it looks like to me is it looks like they don't want to stop abortions. It looks like they want to increase the number of accidental pregnancies and force poor women to have those children. That's what it looks like to me. And we can talk more about that some other time. If you send me a DM or if you come back another live stream, like this is one of those topics that I'm like very, very knowledgeable about. I've read a lot about this. All right, everybody. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Next week, it is likely that I will have jury duty, so it is possible that we will be off next week. Keep your eye on my TikTok schedule and my Twitch schedule and my schedule on my website. That is where the updates will happen. And on my Discord, the updates will happen if I'm on jury duty and I won't be able to stream next week. If you are an Amazon Prime subscriber and you want to help out the show financially in a way that is completely free to you, if you just subscribe to my Twitch channel using your Amazon Prime account, I get $2 and it costs you 0. So I'd really appreciate if y'all would do that. Special thanks to Triska and Lauren for having done that. Special thanks to my super fans on TikTok, Susie, Sean, Dean, and Hot Sauce. And special thanks to my patrons, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. The Discord is one of my favorite resources because it's a great way to get in touch. It's a great way to form community with other people that like this show. And also, there are great recommendations on there for books and podcasts and organizations that you should 100% donate your time and money to. If there are questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, if you guys want any information, like sources on claims that I have made, or things come up when I'm not streaming, feel free to email me. DMs are open. I want to be a resource for you guys. If I can help you some way to become more informed and involved, I want to do that for you. So use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea that you guys will do the work out there. Watching my live stream is great, but what's even better is if you go out there and you do some volunteer shifts, if you talk to people about stuff, if you are donating your time and your money to organizations like Swing Left or Vote Save America or Run for Something or Indivisible, like these organizations need you to help them. And so even if you can only do one shift a month, it is better than nothing. So let's all do the work. And hopefully the more people that do the work, the less work we will all individually have to do. All right, everybody, I will see you tomorrow. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.